Yeah.
But I remember all that the news had was like everyone lost their homes. The normal person that's in the States is now living in a tent. And like it was like this big thing where it was like, oh, no one in the US can live in a house anymore. And like now I can look back at that and be like, wow, that had to have been massively blown out of perception. But when all you're seeing on the news is tense and tense and tense, and people talking about how they were well off and then they had no home and they had a family and they lost their job and whatever else, like that's programming you for the worst case scenario.
Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. The world has been interesting recently, and on Monday there was a lot. Was it Monday or was it? Oh, yeah, it was Monday, where there was the Japanese stock market crash. And we wanted to talk about this because we do feel like this is super relevant to what we talk about here on this podcast and how we can really look at this time in a more positive way instead of getting fearful about it. So, in case we haven't met, I am one of the co-hosts here. I'm Karen.
And I'm Ashley, and I just quickly like looked at it because I've been in my own world, and all the headlines are like the stock market crash and the worst is yet to come and
Right.
all this kind of stuff. And it's just like a lot of that doomsday fear because that's what gets people to click, right?
Right.
So yeah.
Exactly. And that really is what got my attention about it because there was like, I was noticing when I saw for the first time that this is what happened on Monday, I was like, there was a small tinge of fear that I noticed that popped up in me.
Mhm.
And that's what sparked me being like, we should talk about this because if I am seeing in myself a small tinge of fear around it, I know others are absolutely seeing a tinge of fear or big lots of fear around it. And I
Yeah.
want to talk about how detrimental that really can be to
Mhm.
us when we see stuff like this because our world, it is ever evolving, it is ever changing. And the thing about being human is we don't always like change. Okay,
Yeah.
like our brain is created kind of like a computer, right? Our brain sees something and it wants to create a familiarity with it. If we don't find familiarity, then that tends to create a fear response because we are now in the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Like we have no idea what's going to happen. And
Mhm.
because of that, our body wants to keep us safe. Our brain wants to keep us safe. And so now it's like, oh, we don't know what that is. We have to stay away from this. Your
Yeah.
amygdala is doing this all behind the scenes, okay? And your amygdala isn't necessarily like the thing with the amygdala. A lot of people will like Debbie Down the amygdala that it's like only about fear, only about anger. No, it's just a familiar unfamiliar part of your brain, right? Like it's experiencing something and it's going that's unknown. We need to stay safe. We need to be aware that that's unknown.
Yeah.
And what can happen is if we are dysregulated in our emotions and we're not actually paying attention to ourselves and our emotions, we can allow that to create a very big fear response, which is what I saw on social media on
Mhm.
Monday when I saw this happen. I actually saw a friend of mine. She was like, oh my God, this just happened. My husband is out getting gas right now and pulling out all of our money from the bank. And
Mm.
the thing about that is, if I have no problem with being prepared for catastrophes, right? Like, for example, here in Florida, we have hurricanes, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's just a thing. So, my husband and I, we have water in our pantry in case we lose water. We have like a hurricane prepare thing, right? Like, we have stuff just to make sure that if power goes out, we're not going to starve basically.
Yeah.
Like we're taking care of ourselves in that way, right? But we don't have this like overabundant stockhold of things
Yeah.
because when I think that when we do that, like the doomsday preparers that you see in the world today. I think when you do that, you're no longer stepping into an abundance mindset. You're stepping into a scarcity fear mindset. And if you look at your life as you being the creator, which we all are creators, if you look at your life as a creator, if you are staying in the fear, lack mindset, you will always create
Mhm.
more of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the thing when I notice in myself, when I read stuff like the Japanese stock market crash, when I read stuff like that and I notice a fear response coming up, I can choose in that moment to allow it to continue to cause fear, or I
Mhm.
can notice it for what it is because my body's going to have reactions. I'm not going to stop those reactions. I'm not suppressing the emotion. I'm simply noticing it and
Mhm.
then asking myself, is this what I want to continue to feel? And if the
Mhm.
answer is no, I now have to ask myself, what do I want to feel? And so I asked myself whenever I noticed that I was feeling that tinge of fear when I saw Japanese stock market crash and my friend being like, we're taking all our money out of the bank, like we're doomsdaying it. I had
Yeah.
to ask myself if that's what I wanted to create. And the
Yeah.
answer was no, I don't want to create this. So
Mhm.
I started going, well, what are the possibilities? What are the beautiful possibilities that this could create for us as a collective human beings?
Yeah.
And what could it create in our economy that could be so beautiful and amazing? And I started asking that question instead of
Mhm.
continuing down the fear of, oh my God, what could happen? This is unknown. Unknown does not have to be scary.
No.
Unfamiliar does not have to be scary. And you can train your amygdala when you see unknown, unfamiliar things, you can train your amygdala to instead of having that fear response, you can instead train it to go, I wonder what might happen that could be really cool, that could really be positive in what I'm trying to create in my life already.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that that whole familiar and unfamiliar thing, we've been trained in the schools about history and all the bad things and all the bad crashes and how people had to live off of nothing and had nothing. Like, there's the dirty 20s and all that kind of stuff. And it is this like big thing that you're taught in school. And so for me, like I wasn't even in the US when the 2008 crash
Mm,
happened.
yeah.
But I remember all that the news had was like everyone lost their homes. The normal person that's in the States is now living in a tent. And like it was like this big thing where it was like, oh, no one in the US can live in a house anymore. And like now I can look back at that and be like, wow, that had to have been massively blown out of perception. But when all you're seeing on the news is tense and tense and tense, and people talking about how they were well off and then they had no home and they had a family and they lost their job and whatever else, like that's programming you for the worst case scenario.
Mhm.
And then we just had COVID, and COVID programmed us hard. And thankfully, a lot of people are like, okay, I'm not watching this shit anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and like there's so much of all of that going on. And it's kind of like for me, like we have forest fires here and they're increasingly getting worse. Like we used to have some occasionally, rarely, and now we have like 40 at all times, probably similar to California. And it's ridiculous. Like my Facebook page is, oh, there's smoke. Oh, there's smoke. New fire. And it can be like a teeny tiny little thing. And everyone's posting about it constantly. And so you have the whole collective thinking about fires and everything burning down. And the kids switched to us on Tuesday. And that Tuesday, there was two new fires that were like in our area. And they're like, oh, we have two new fires. It's like, how do you even know about that? Like, obviously, it's being told to them. Like, I don't even tell them when there's these little fires or talk about it. Like, I get annoyed seeing
Yeah.
it on Facebook
Yeah.
because it's always there. And it's just like, there's nothing we can do. Like it's just like you, like we're gonna be fire safe. We know what we need to do if we have to pack up and go. And where we live, we aren't in a situation where we're stuck. Like there's the bad stories came from when people weren't prepared
Mm-hmm.
because there never used to be so many fires, which is an interesting thing. Like what is the reason that there's so many fires now? So there was like Fort McMurray that burnt down here years ago, and they only had one road out. And so that caused a lot of trouble with people getting out safely. And then there's towns that burnt down completely, and the same idea, like they're in the middle of nowhere, there's one road to get out. Um, so yeah, so that's where like people's concerns can come from. But where we live, there's tons of roads. We live right by a lake, like right by two lakes. We're good. Like you don't have any reason to panic in that regard. And same complete idea. But when you have the media brainwashing you
Mm-hmm.
to be afraid and what's the worst that could happen and the worst is yet to come and all that kind of stuff, like it isn't it is familiar, like it's familiar to everything you've been taught and everything the news tells you all the time. And I personally hope everything crashes. So I'm one of those conspiracy people where I'm like, our systems all have to crash. Like they have to fail, they have to fall, we have to rebuild. That's my mindset. And so I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm ready for it. Like, like that's what's going to rebuild our economy. That's what's going to get us out of this horrible situation. Like where I live, the average person probably makes around $40 an hour. This is me guessing. $40 an hour is probably on the higher end even. Because I know people that are making low 20s an hour, and rent is for a normal family home is $3,500 a month, and mortgages are more than that. And so your entire like that whole like 70-30 rule for your paycheck, I believe that's what it is, where you want 30% to go to your household expenses. Um, we're living in a situation where it's 90%. Like people are just paying for housing. Like that's all they can handle. And there has to be a massive crash to change that. And that's what happened with the 2008 crash, really, is it did balance out, and now we're headed back in that same direction. It
Mm-hmm.
needs to balance out. So,
Yeah.
anyways, that's a random what good can
Yeah,
come
but
of it.
it's still connected because the question that I really want, like, not just other people, but for myself to really look at this question and go, how do I want to feel about this situation? Right? Like, because obviously it's unfamiliar and I still have programming in me, in my brain, that says unfamiliar means fear. But it doesn't
Mhm.
have to, right? Like, how do I want to feel about this? Means you look at the response that you have because your body and your brain are going to have a response to things in life.
Yeah.
Suppressing it doesn't help, right? That is
Mhm.
not the answer. But you notice it. You
Mhm.
notice how you're feeling at any given moment. And
Mhm.
then you're asking yourself, how long do I want to feel like this?
Yeah.
How long do I want to live in a state of fear?
Yeah.
And I've gotten to the point where I really look at every single like molecule in my body and I go, is there anxiety in that molecule? Like, is that part of my body feeling anxiety around XYZ, right? Because if it does, then that means I haven't gotten rid of all of those hormones of stress that can circulate so easily in our body, right? And so if I notice that I have fear, anxiety, anger, whatever, frustration, all the really low level energies,
Mhm.
I can ask myself, okay, what do I need to do that maybe worked in the past to help me regulate this emotion because it's not helping me. Because I wish I could have every single person in this world understand that your thoughts are things and
Yeah.
every single thought needs to be taken captive. Period. End of story. Like
Yeah.
if you want to see change in the world, it starts in your head. Like that is how you change the world. You change how you look at the world. Each
Yeah.
one of us. So yesterday I was at the hospital. Actually, no, I was at the surgery center, and it was a very interesting conversation that came up about doomsday kind of stuff, talking about how, oh, China at any moment could start bombing the United States, and I mean that would affect you too, Ashley, because the United States and Canada are like we're right next door, right? So
Yeah.
Mexico, it would affect the whole North America
Hmm.
peninsula, really. So it would be like this huge pandemonium, right? If that happened. And when he started talking about this, I asked myself, do I want to feel fear around this? And the answer was no, because I looked at it in the sense of, well, what is what is the worst? And I'm going to put air quotes up because what's the worst thing that could happen? My life
Yeah.
gets taken away from me. Is that
Hmm.
really the worst thing that could happen?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Because I know I'm a creator. I know I'm divinity. I know I'm forever, right? And so, like, if I am no longer on this plane of existence, that just means that my time is up and I can be okay with that. I don't have to feel fear around it. I don't have to feel anything about it really because I'm not done. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen because I know in my core that I'm meant for doing what we're doing right now. I'm meant for like bringing up these concepts with people, like having that conversation yesterday. I brought up like, well, yeah, we could be afraid of it, or we can regulate. And I said this, we can regulate our emotions around it. We can live in fight or flight where we're
Hmm.
just fearful all the time, or we could ask ourselves, wait, how would a creator think? A
Hmm.
creator that wants to create something beautiful would look at this situation and go, where's the beauty? What can I create from this? And you
Yeah.
change your thoughts around it. And you, as you change your thoughts and you verbalize those thoughts, sometimes you don't even have to verbalize those thoughts. But when you change your thoughts, you change other people around you. And that's
Hmm.
how you change the world. Like
Hmm.
everybody's like, oh, I have to do this big grand thing, and there's no way that politics are in the dumper. Our world is falling apart, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if you want to make huge drastic change, it has nothing to do with going out and starting a nonprofit or doing something amazing with animals, taking care of the environment. It has everything to do, yes, those things are helpful, okay? I'm not gonna stop that, but it has everything to do with changing your thoughts first, because
Yeah.
those thoughts infect other people. If we can
Hmm.
infect other people with negative thoughts, what if we could infect people with positive and go,
Yeah.
what's the possibility that could happen from this? So,
For sure.
looking at that Japanese stock market crash, I asked myself, do I want to fall into the majority of people that are afraid about this? And the answer was no, because I can't affect change if I'm going scared because of what might happen. If I'm going, oh no, I have to take everything out of the bank.
Yeah.
If I created it once, I can create it again, right?
Yeah.
Like I created it. It's there. I don't have to hold on to it so tightly, because when I hold on to it so tightly, it just falls right through my hands. So,
Yeah.
what if instead I look at what I've created and go, "Wow,
Hmm.
I did that." And I'm going to
Yeah.
sit with that instead of being
Yeah.
fearful that I'm going to lose it all, because when you fear that you're going to lose it all, that is what you create. Your
Yeah.
thoughts are things, people.
Hmm. Well, and I like as you're talking, it just reminds me so much of Outwitting the Devil by
Mm,
Napoleon Hill.
yeah.
I love that book and it talks in such a unique way. I really enjoy it. It's almost similar to the Screw Tape Letters by C.S.
Mm-hmm.
Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
It has like that similar feel. However, it's more about success and like being the creator than what the devil is trying to do. But yeah, so I really both of those books I enjoy. So um in Napoleon's book that got him famous, Think and Grow Rich, he talks about how with every seed of with every disadvantage, there's a seed of equal or greater advantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, when I look at my life, when things aren't going well or when something bad is going to happen, it's always bad in like the current present perspective. You also can set yourself up for that seed of equal or greater advantage. But you have to actually seize it and plant it and water it and all the fun things. Like it's not just going to naturally happen to you.
Right.
Um, and so for me, when I think about those bad things that could happen, I'm like, they're just going to set our world up to be better. Like
Mm-hmm.
our systems are broken. Like we need to have this crash happen. Like we've been on this journey since the war and the Rockefellers and all that kind of stuff. And it's time for a new type of world. Like this is not working anymore. And yeah, so for me, when I think of that, that's what I think of when we had some situations happen in the last 2 weeks. And I'm just like, I don't know how, but this is setting us up. Like
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna be set up. And that's the first thing that enters my brain
Yeah.
is like something that is unexpected happens and something that I don't like happens, especially when it's finances. Whenever it's
Sure.
finances, it's like this is going to set us up.
Yeah.
Something's going to come and set us up because we've had too many unexpected expenses with court
Mm-hmm.
um, that are mass amounts of money and to pay for that it's always worked out that like my brain is like it's always going to work out like because there's been so many and it's the same with court like we had so many things and even now I just recently had something come up where I'm like oh I am so fucking ready for this chapter to be closed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like the book was only supposed to go to chapter 12, and somehow we're on chapter 25. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be done at chapter 26. Oh, no, there's one more plot twist here.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so, like, there's that kind of progression, but um, it's in that final stage for sure. And I can see how it all worked out to our good and our benefit. But there also is the like, why the hell did this have to take 4 years? Like,
Mm-hmm.
like, really? And so I bat a little bit between the two, but at the end of the day, I know it worked out the way it needed to. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that is an example of doing this too. Like
yeah.
where you can, and there probably were times, and I know there were because we've talked about it, where it was like there would be a fear response. And
Yeah.
that's okay. Like the thing is like um we sometimes get stuck on, oh no, I thought immediately about this negative thought instead of going to the positive. And then we beat ourselves up for going to the negative and then we make it worse, right? Like we're like, oh no, I did that. I kept doing this. I kept thinking that instead of going to the positive. Listen, you noticed. Like stop beating yourself up. You noticed that there was something that you were like, okay, I went to the fear or I went to the whatever. And
Mhm.
the more you do that, the more you catch either the fear or the anger or the anxiety or the whatever, and you go, wait a minute, I don't have to keep feeling like this. Like
Yeah.
I don't beat myself up anymore for going, oh, I went straight to anger or frustration or I went straight to whatever. I don't beat myself up for that anymore because listen, these are just whenever I think a thought, hormones are released in my body that
Yeah.
create this emotion in my body, right? So this is a cycle that I've trained in it. So when I notice that I'm doing that, though, I go, I noticed. I did
Mhm.
it. I
Yeah.
figured it out. I noticed. I became so aware of what was going on in my body that I didn't let it go by, because this is where the unconscious mind can really be a little fucker sometimes, is when you just let it go by and you don't really pay attention to it, right? And many of us are living in that unaware state. Like,
Mhm.
the spiritual community talks about waking up, and I'm putting air quotes around waking up. Waking up simply means being aware of your thoughts and feelings on a second to second moment. Like, it's
Yeah.
not something magical or spiritual. It can be, but it's literally just becoming so in tune with yourself
Yeah.
that you notice when you start to feel or think a certain way, that you're like, is that really what I want to keep creating? Because I'm a
Mhm.
creator. And I remind myself this every single day. I'm a creator. Whenever I have to sit myself down and go, you're thinking this thought, and you're notice that you're thinking this thought, and you're
Mhm.
feeling this way. I'm a creator. Do I want to keep doing this? And the more that you do that, like
Mhm.
you did with court, where it was like, oh, everything always works out. Like, the more you did that, the more you created muscle memory, just like an athlete would, or if you're trying to create a new habit, you're creating muscle memory
Mhm.
towards what you want to start thinking. And then
Yeah.
eventually, the more you do that, you start to just naturally go to that thought, which
Mhm.
I've done this in my life too. And now, like, looking back at how I used to think, I'm like, ew, why would I want to go back to that? That didn't create what I wanted to create at all.
Yeah.
So it's really this muscle memory. And so when you're looking at, like, the stock market crashing, people losing their houses, when you're looking at natural disasters, like, how do you want to feel about that? What
Yeah.
could happen is way more fun to think about. What are the possibilities of what might happen is way more fun to think about than, oh my God, we're losing everything. That's really not that fun to think about. I don't know about you, but I don't really
No.
feel very good when I think like that. And so
Yeah.
the more that I practice thinking how I want to think, and
Yeah.
talking and acting and being how I want to think, the more I feel good. The more
Mhm.
I just go, oh, I
Yeah.
forgot that I was a creator. Because I have to
Mhm.
remind myself, like, this is a constant, like, you remember, you forget, you remember, you forget, you remember, you forget. And the moment that you go, oh, wait, I forgot that I was a creator and that I was doing that, is you're winning every single time you do that, because you're creating more of a muscle memory that says, I am a creator. And then
Mhm.
you start to see, this is when it gets super freaking fun. You start to see how the thoughts actually created the thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes it, and most of the time actually, it happens in ways that you're like, I did not expect that at all. I had no idea that that seemingly disaster was going to turn into something so beautiful. And if I just, like, really settle into myself and just kind of watch, you become an observer of your life. You start to notice how the thoughts actually create on a second to second basis. And
Mhm.
the more you notice, the more you start to really make the connection that you did that, you created that. And that's
Yeah.
when you start to wake up in your life and you go, oh,
Mhm.
that's what I missed.
Yes. Well, and that's the really crazy thing is that most people aren't aware of any aspects of their body, their mental life, or any of those kind of things, or even like your surroundings. Like for me, that's been something I've always been hyper aware of is who am I surrounded by,
Yeah.
you know? And so you kind of go through these phases of your outside world first, and then you kind of go into your internal and that kind of thing. And so when you actually get to your actual like every second thoughts, it's a really hard thing to be paying attention to constantly because you're so trained not to.
Yeah. You're trained to think that the world just happens to you. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many conversations I've been in, even with my own family, where it's
Hmm.
like, oh, this situation happened and I have zero control over it.
Yeah.
Stop it. You're a freaking creator. You
Yeah.
allowed that on some level.
Yeah.
And if you allowed it, you can ask yourself, well, what made me allow this? What
Hmm.
could I want myself to learn? What
Yeah.
could I learn from
Hmm.
this situation? And when I start to look at my life like that, I go, oh, everything's connected. Everything's a lesson.
Yeah.
Everything is just a moment to grow and learn. Instead
Hmm.
of like when I was a Christian, it was like there was this big guy in the sky that was pulling the strings, right? Like, and that is not very empowering,
No.
unfortunately. And I think
Well, I think that's the whole point is for it to not be empowering.
and the sad thing is that most Christians don't understand that that's so disempowering and that that doesn't allow you to be the creator of your life. And the
Yeah.
Bible even talks about how we are made in the image of God. But you ask a Christian what that means, and they're going to give you some convoluted something or other because
Yeah.
they don't know. I know because I did this. Like, I remember being like, what does it mean that I'm made in the image of God? Like, I would always scratch my head around that. And I would give these weird, crazy, convoluted answers. And at the end of the day, it was like, did she really know what she's talking about? No, I didn't, because I didn't realize that I was in control. I was pulling the strings, not some dude with a white beard that's up there that wants to rain down fire and brimstone on me if I don't love him. Like,
Yeah.
that just doesn't make any sense
Or if
now.
I love something other than him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like it just it doesn't make any sense now, and I scratch my head and I go, "What?" But when you actually go, "Wait a minute. I'm the creator.
Hmm.
I am that divinity. I
Hmm.
can see the connection of what I've created in my life."
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, for me, I hate to say this, but when Christians talk about manifestation, it's almost a oxymoron because it's like, do you really believe that you manifested that, or that somebody in the sky manifested it for you? Like,
Yeah.
this doesn't really compute for me how this works for you. And that
But
honestly
it
was a
doesn't
concept that made me be like, I can't do Christianity anymore. This isn't working for me.
yeah, it's one of those many times where like what people read in the Bible and what they actually do are two very different things.
Absolutely.
Like my perception was when it says we're made in God's image was that we had a soul. So
Mm,
like dogs and everything else, they didn't have souls,
didn't,
so they
yeah,
couldn't have eternal life. That's what I understood it to mean. But then Jesus would say, like, you can move this mountain with
exactly.
faith as small as a mustard seed. And so I'm like, okay, so why is nobody doing it?
Why
You
is
know?
nobody doing it? Yes.
And
Hmm.
then that's like the interesting thing because like I hated Reiki when I first was introduced to it as a Christian because it was evil.
Hmm.
I don't even know why I thought it was evil. But because it was working with energies, I was like, oh no, that you stay away from that.
Hmm.
Um, and so then when I actually started diving in and kind of deconstructing. I hadn't fully started deconstructing, but I had opened up to like, okay, not everything is evil. And found out like the guy who initiated Reiki, he was a Christian teacher. And the kids were like, well, you talk about how Jesus did all these miracles. What miracles have you done or
Yeah.
seen? And a kid challenged him in that way. He's like, I haven't done or seen any miracles, but that's literally all Jesus talks about in the New Testament.
Yes.
And so it's like, so for anyone who is following like the Bible as the word of God, it is that if you believe that Jesus is God, the Son of God, however you want to word it, um, you should be listening to him,
Hmm.
like, and he said, go and save and not go and preach my gospel, but go and like heal, go and perform miracles, all that kind of stuff. And no one's doing it.
Hmm.
And you hear stories of like somewhere in Africa, someone did this. And it's crazy. Like there is a Christian guy who raised someone from the dead since Jesus was alive and all this whatever. And I'm like, yes, but if we are being told by him to go do that, then we should all be doing it. It should be a normal part of our
Yes.
life.
Yes.
And it's not because We take the easy stuff, we take oh, he's here to save us and he's here to be praised. And all those things just feel good,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
going and worshiping and singing songs and being in that kind of community around music, that's so therapeutic. Like that feels so good. But going and putting yourself to the test and saying, I'm going to heal this person, that's scary.
Or
So why
I'm gonna
would anyone
heal
try?
myself. Like that's
Yeah,
another one too. Not just healing another person, but I'm gonna heal myself.
yeah, yeah. And people would always be like, "Oh, like God, please heal this person. Oh God, please help me. Oh, I have this wrong with me. God, please have it be in your will to help me." And it's like, can we please stop saying that? I see people that have really hard things going on, and my empathy, like truthfully, goes out the window when I say, "Oh, I really hope that it's not in God's will for this to continue much longer." I'm just like, "Oh my God, He told you to do it. He didn't tell you to ask. He told you to do it. He told you to ask and seek and knock, like actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
Knocking is doing it." So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways, that's my little random rant on the Bible.
I mean, it's still all connected, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So we started with the Japanese stock market and we ended with God and Christianity. That was my fault. Sorry about
Well,
that.
I think the rant is there because I have so many people on like Facebook that are believers.
Yeah.
And so it's very constant in my realm of consciousness,
Hmm.
to be seeing things like that. So it's very front of mind,
Yeah,
just
same.
like things with my kids are very front of mind because it's like the bullshit never ends.
Yeah.
So those are things that we often will talk about because that is like the stuff that I see so much of, kind
Hmm.
of thing.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And my deconstruction probably started 15 years ago, right?
Hmm.
So it was a very slow process for me. And so I still have, like you said, a lot of people on my Facebook that are they're very
Hmm.
evangelical Christians. And so I still see the same thing too. So,
Yeah.
same for me, it's on front of mind also. But when we realize that we are the creator and that we have that power, we take our power back. We stop assuming that somebody else is going to do something for us, and we realize that we can do the thing for us.
Hmm.
So, anyways,
Definitely.
so, guys, this was a fun one. I could talk about this all day, every day. I think I say that every time. But so, friends, if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like, follow us, subscribe, leave a comment, and let us know what you thought about this. And then, if you're listening on your favorite podcast host, go ahead and give us a 5-star and leave a comment, ask your questions. Also, we'd love to hear from you. So, but with that, we are going to call TMI Advice You Didn't Want a wrap for today. See everyone next time. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us, and don't forget to subscribe.